Hey everybody, welcome to this new edition, if you will, in the first ever high definition edition of the cartoon Flashback. Now, I'm pretty sure there's not one person that has not been a fan of this character, Scooby-Doo. Not one person in this world has not been, that I know of, has not been a fan of his. Because everywhere you go, well, you ask somebody if they know who Scooby-Doo is, and they'll likely tell you. But it's hard to believe that Scooby-Doo is one of the only animated franchises out there, one of the very few animated franchises that has survived for as long as he has. I mean, when you think about it, in less than 2 years, he'll be hitting his 45th anniversary. And that's hard to believe. 45 years of that character. 45 years of seeing Scooby. Of watching Scooby, Shaggy, Fred, Daphne, Velma. Over 45 years almost. Just about 45 years. It's been over 40, there's no doubt about that. It's actually 43 now. But almost 45 years. And it's still hard to believe. You know, in 1969 when Scooby-Doo Where Are You came out, I wasn't even born. To be honest with you. I wasn't even, my existence never even popped into my mom's mind. Heck, the marriage my mom would have to my father 6 years later didn't even pop into her mind. I mean, she had just turned 20 years old, so none of that really mattered. But what mattered to any kids at that time, and even young adults, was Scooby-Doo. Well, not really, but when it came to watching something on Saturday mornings, it was Scooby-Doo. We all pretty much know the history behind Scooby-Doo. How it was originally going to be something else, but then they toned it down because they felt the original idea would be too scary for kids. But it's surprising how a character named after a lyric in a Frank Sinatra song, I believe, or Bob Hope song, whoever it was, can be elevated as far as he has been. Think of it this way. Scooby-Doo Where Are You had two different intros during its run. The original 69 intro and the original 1970 intro. Then, about 2 years later, after basically a year or so of reruns, Scooby-Doo pretty much entered a new field for animation. Something that had been rare, something that I don't think had ever been done at that time. Maybe I'm wrong, but something that had never really been done at that time. Scooby-Doo actually had his own 1-hour cartoon show. Now I understand that there were 1-hour cartoon programming shows where you had like either live action or something else, and you had cartoons in between. I mean, you take Banana Splits, for example, there you go. Cattanooga Cats, for example, there you go. But this was the first time that 1 hour, 44 minutes if you will, was dedicated to one episode, one story entirely. Not separate cartoons, not separate 5-minute intervals and all that, but a separate, but its own entity, but its own unique episode. Something that was usually reserved for prime time. But 1 hour of animation was dedicated to one episode of Scooby-Doo's, the new Scooby-Doo show, the new Scooby-Doo movies. Now, the new Scooby-Doo movies, believe it or not, in case maybe some of you don't know, was actually sort of was basically a way, in my opinion, to really get Scooby-Doo out in the mainstream. Not saying he wasn't already, but really get him out there, really get the name of the character out there. It was also a way for younger viewers to kind of get an idea of who certain characters, of who certain people were. In the list of names of celebrities that did appear on the show and actually did voice their own characters, or voice themselves, if you will, it's like a who's who. The late Don Knotts was on there 2 times. You had Sandy Duncan on there. You know, and the list could go on. You had Adam West and Burt Ward, I think, reprise their roles as Batman and Robin. You know, you had the Harlem Globetrotters, people doing variety voices for them. You had celebrity impersonators doing voices of Laurel and Hardy. You had celebrity impersonators doing that of the Three Stooges, I believe so. And again, the list just goes on. And to me, it was just a way of getting the mainstream media attention for the Scooby-Doo franchise and for Hanna-Barbera, which I think was a great move. I mean, you even had Davy Jones of the Monkees. Davy Jones, who did the original Scooby-Doo theme for Where Are You, appeared on the show. You had Dick Van Dyke doing his own voice. I mean, again, the list just goes on and on. You had Mama Cass doing her own voice, I believe. You know, Mamas and the Papas. And again, the list just goes on and on and on of a who's who. You know? And it didn't just stop there. It just didn't stop with celebrity cameos or celebrity guest appearances and stuff. No. It actually evolved as well. The new Scooby-Doo movies actually were the first ones, I think, as they entered their 2nd season, to involve crossovers in animation. Even though it was the same animation studio that did all these other shows, it was the first time that you saw one of the now mainstream characters, besides Yogi, that could stand alongside the likes of Yogi and Fred Flintstone. You had the first mainstream character, if you will, Scooby-Doo. You had, basically you had one of their own mainstream characters crossing over with the other shows. Other shows that had just began around the same time the new Scooby-Doo movies had, as well as probably began that following year in the 2nd season. Basically shows that would need like a kickstart to their series. And the Hanna-Barbera shows that crossed over was like almost a who's who as well. You had Josie and the Pussycats, which was also a co-production of Hanna-Barbera and Archie Comics. They crossed over in the Haunted Showboat. Mystery in Persia. You had a crossover between a co-production between the Scooby-Doo gang and the characters from the co-produced Hanna-Barbera Columbia TriStar, Columbia Pictures cartoon Genie, which was based off the live-action sitcom Genie, or I Dream of Genie, which featured more of a teenage version of Genie. Characters, I think, new characters named Corey and Henry, as well as an apprentice genie called Babu. And she crossed over in her show, and she, along with those characters, crossed over with the Scooby Gang in Mystery in Persia episode in the 2nd season. And then you had the Wild Winds of Winona. And this is where you had them cross over with the characters of Speed Buggy. Speed Buggy himself and his apprentice and his friends. I can't think of the names right now, I gotta watch the episode. But it was actually pretty cool. It was actually pretty cool to see that. And for something to do, and for a show to do that for the first time, it was unbelievable. Now I know some of you watching will say, well, they had Huckleberry Hound crossover with Yogi. Yeah, well, here's the thing. That was obvious. That was a crossover, but not really much of a crossover, because pretty much you knew that was going to happen. It's like, all he has to do is bump into him, there you go. This was basically, these crossovers were basically 3 established new series, one series that came out the year, I think, at the same year as the new Scooby-Doo movies, and 2 series that were just getting off the ground that were actually crossing over with them, with the new Scooby-Doo show, or the new Scooby-Doo movies. And that was a cool thing. Some people may not look at it that way, but I do. It was actually a very cool thing. I mean, you get to see Genie standing alongside the likes of Scooby and Shaggy, you know, Alexander becoming a chicken along with chickening out along with Shaggy. You know, it's like, you know, what more could you ask for? Now after that, around 1975, a few years later, around 75 and 77, they came out with a, I guess you can say, a continuation of Scooby-Doo, Where Are You? Better well known as Scooby-Doo, the new Scooby, better well known as the Scooby-Doo Show. Now the Scooby-Doo Show, about 1975, around 75, 77, was actually unique in its own right. Again, it continued on in a more newer, more, and you could tell just by the animation, a new, more up-to-date version of the characters for that time period. Now, when 77 came around, the Scooby-Doo Show was paired up with another Scooby-Doo spin-off, which was actually kind of a compilation all-star show, if you will, called Laugh Olympics. The Scooby-Doo Show was paired up in a 2-hour block with Laugh Olympics, if you will. 1 hour would be Scooby-Doo Show, would be the Scooby-Doo, the first hour and a half would be the Scooby-Doo Show, Dynamite, Captain Caveman, and then you would have Laugh Olympics. Now, getting back to the Scooby-Doo Show, it also introduced us to a new character. See, one of the things about the previous shows before that is they kind of did expand on the other main characters' backgrounds. In one of the episodes of the Scooby-Doo movies, where the Mystery Inc. meets up with the Harlem Globetrotters, we meet one of Shaggy's relatives, his uncle. And I think, before that, we had maybe an encounter with, I think, one of Daphne's relatives or something like that in a previous incarnation of Scooby-Doo. In either the first or second season of Where Are You? Now, however, fast forwarding back to the Scooby-Doo Show in the mid-70s, it introduced us to an expansion of Scooby's family. An expansion which introduced us to one main character that became, I guess you could say, slightly popular, and according to some, more popular than another character that debuted 2 years later, and that was Scooby-Dum. Scooby-Dum was actually a very funny, very popular character. And allow me to check my time here. Okay, plenty of time. I got a 29-minute window when it comes to HD videos. But anyway, Scooby-Dum was actually a very funny, very popular character. And again, like I said, obviously, according to some sources, more popular than a character that debuted 2 years later. But this character was actually kind of funny and unique. Because he not only was he, as his name progressed, dumb in some aspects, but he always wanted to be like, he had this idea in his mind that he was this major detective. And any time one of the Mystery Inc. gangs, whether it was Fred, Daphne, Velma, or even Shaggy, well, mainly one of the other three, but any one of them said they got to look for clues, Scooby-Dum would reach into, I guess, his little pocket or whatever he had, pull out a magnifying glass and go, well, first he would hear it, he'd go like, clues? And then after hearing that, he'd go like, clues? He'd pick out his magnifying glass and go, dum 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 dum, and try to look around, try to act like a detective, like he's all smart and everything. Which would usually backfire and get the gang in trouble. Now, Scooby-Dum was kind of a mainstay on the show for pretty much most of it. Not all of it, but pretty much most of it. Kind of to establish who he was, if you will. And kind of give Scooby someone to play off of, and someone that obviously makes Scooby, who is a coward at times, as we all know, when it comes to being afraid of things, look more brave and smarter. You know, not the blunt of all the jokes. But again, Dum wasn't the only one introduced in that series. No. There was another character, and even though it was for one episode called the Chiller Diller Movie Thriller, I think that's what it was, the Chiller Diller Movie Thriller, this character really surprised me. I remember back in the mid-2000s, or early to mid-2000s, I was watching Scooby-Doo on Cartoon Network. And I saw this character, and I said, who the heck is this? So I looked it up online, and I found out the Chiller Diller Movie Thriller episode was where this character debuted at. And the character was Scooby's cousin, Scooby-Dee. who was actually the first female Scooby in franchise history, and the only one until about the early 80s. Now here was the thing about it. Scooby-Doo, now here was the thing, Scooby-Doo and Scooby-Dum, even though they were cousins with her, both had crushes on her because she was a very beautiful dog. And I guess it kind of plays more into the realistic aspect, if you will, more of a realistic aspect that even though dogs might be related by blood, doesn't mean they can't, do it. But anyway, she was very unique character. And even though it was her one appearance, she'd actually gained a fan base following. Just like certain other characters in cartoons had, she had gained a following by the fans. In fact, you type in her name in Google, and you'll find pictures of her in the images section, as well as maybe a little section in the Scooby-Doo fan base page where she's at. And again, that was the uniqueness about the Scooby-Doo show. Even though it was kind of a more up-to-date, at that time, modern continuation of Where Are You, it also expanded on, gave us the first glimpse of Scooby's family, to let us know that there was more than one Scooby. There was more than just him. And that would definitely be emphasized a few years later. Because after the Scooby-Doo show, we went from having the Scooby side introduced to 2 years later having the Doo side introduced. Because in 1979, I believe, a new Scooby-Doo show came out called the Scooby-Doo and Scrappy-Doo show. And this is basically introduces the character that I mentioned previously, which many people feel is less popular than Scooby-Dum. And that is Scrappy-Doo. Now, at first, a lot of people thought Scrappy-Doo was okay. But he kind of suffers from, I guess you could say, like, as some people put it, the Cousin Oliver syndrome. Well, if he suffered from it, he definitely didn't suffer as badly as a lot of actors and young actors and actresses, because he stayed on for quite some time. How long, you may ask? Well, from 1979 to basically 1988, we dealt with Scrappy-Doo. There's your answer. I'm not lying. Well, almost 10 years. We'll just say about 10 years we dealt with Scrappy-Doo. But the thing is, the Scooby-Doo Scrappy-Doo show, again, was kind of basically the same as the Scooby-Doo show. A more modern continuation of Where Are You? But more so, instead of Dum getting them in trouble because he tries to act like a detective and finds things that are not really clues and stuff like that, Scrappy-Doo would get the entire gang in trouble at times because of what he was. You see, we all know, like I mentioned earlier, Scooby was portrayed as a cowardly dog. And cowardly dog, they can be brave at times when need be, but mostly as a cowardly dog. Well, Scrappy was the exact opposite of Scooby. He wanted to be brave. He wanted to fight, like the ghost and the baddies all by himself. Now, true, Scrappy did get scared a few times, but not much, because he wanted to be brave and tough. Well, again, this would kind of get the gang in trouble, because they'd always have to either find out where he's at, or he'd be out, find out. Basically, what would happen is Scrappy would go try to take off, try to capture the monster, or if they're running from the monster, Scrappy would be elsewhere setting up one of his Scrappy traps, which most of the time would backfire on the gang. Now, for some reason, Scrappy became popular because of this. I don't know why. I don't think it was annoyance popularity or something like that. I think he was just popular because young kids could relate with him. Young boys, that is. Now, after the Scooby-Doo and Scrappy-Doo show ended, the first season, it continued on. But what happened is they started to go in the direction of being more about 11-minute shorts. 5, sometimes 7 minutes, sometimes few episodes in the following season or so would be 7-minute to 11-minute shorts, which would mainly focus on Scooby, Shaggy, and Scrappy. Now, in a sense, they would still continue the Mystery Inc. situation, but it would only be them. But they wouldn't be much mystery solvers and all that. because they mainly be going on different adventures around the world. Either just looking for work or whatever, mysteries to solve or whatever, even though they would reluctantly do it, you know. But still, it's mainly just like I guess you could see more in the, how do you put it? More in the tradition of almost Looney Tunes, original Yogi Berra show wise. Basically those kind of things, just little short animated cartoons. Well, that lasted for a few years. And then in 1983, I believe, again, like I said, that lasted for a few years. But then in 1983, they decided to basically revamp the Scooby-Doo and Scrappy-Doo show, make it the new Scooby-Doo and Scrappy-Doo show, and reintroduce the character back to the lineup. Now you might say to yourself, well, who would be the best suited for that? Now, I don't know if there was a vote done or something like that or whatever, but the one character that made a comeback and rejoined the cast in 1983 was Daphne. That's right. Now you might think, well, what about Fred? What about Velma? Well, apparently, according to popular belief and several sources, Daphne was more popular out of those two, and fans wanted to see more of her. Now, in a sense, there was a reason for that, because based in earlier episodes of the new Scooby-Doo movies, and some of Where Are You, and even the Scooby-Doo show, Daphne would kind of almost side with Shaggy and Scooby in believing that certain things were supernatural. In other words, they were haunted, and she didn't want nothing to do with it. And like them, she just wanted to get out of there. So it only made sense that she would be selected to rejoin them as part of the group. And I guess in a sense it made it more believable because someone like her kind of could relate to Scooby and Shaggy believing that kind of stuff really exists. And when you take a look at the episodes, even though they were separated into two separate 11-minute shorts, you could definitely tell that she could relate to it in a big way, because there were times they weren't just dealing with traditional Mystery Inc. cases, but they were also dealing with real-life supernatural stuff. Now, the one difference about this, was they were actually portrayed as a news reporting team. Apparently, Daphne had become a news reporter, and Shaggy and Scooby and Scrappy had joined her on the same team. So that kind of worked out, and believe it or not, this concept of these three together ran for basically from 1983 to about 1987. This ran. I'm not lying. They were together for about 3 to 4 years as a team. It's no lie. And basically, a lot of people liked it. A lot of people did. The following year, the 11-minute shorts, they still continued on the following year, but it was mostly substituted by, I guess you could say, an all-new format. Well, it was the same format, but different. You see, the all-new Scooby-Doo and Scrappy-Doo show basically separated a whole episode into like 2 chapters. Basically, it'd be the same title, but it'd be like, for example, a Halloween Hassle at Dracula's Castle would be separated by part 1 and part 2. So it'd be like little mini chapters. Like chapter 1, chapter 2 kind of deal. And the other unique thing about the all-new Scooby-Doo Scrappy-Doo show was the animation indeed was better. The intro was definitely more 80s and upbeat. But it also allowed the return of some of the Mystery Inc. gang. There were several episodes where you had Fred rejoin them as part of the story. In fact, he rejoined them in, I think, one of the final episodes, which was the Nutcracker Scoob. And he joined them in London in sort of a Sherlock Holmes kind of case. In a Sherlock Holmes kind of case. Now, Fred wasn't the only one to do it individually. Velma also got a shot to go individual with them as well. And I think it was only for one episode that she did individual work with them, and that was in the episode A Night Louse at the White House. course, though, there were several occasions, I think about 3 actually, where the gang got back together as a team. You had Happy Birthday Scooby-Doo, which I think was the last episode, I'm not really sure, of the all-new Scooby-Doo Scrappy-Doo show. You had, again, Halloween Hassle at Dracula's Castle, as well as you had the ghostly adventure, something like the Ancient Astronauts or something like that. So it was really, really interesting, and to me that was one of the reasons that show, even though it lasted for about a year or two, was very popular with fans. The all-new Scooby-Doo Scrappy-Doo show, because not only did it keep the same format as the year before, but with just one story in particular, but it also brought back the Mystery Inc. gang, and in a sense didn't shove them down our throat, but just brought them back. As like, hey, there's Fred, or hey, there's Velma, or hey, there's both of them. And people liked it because it was like a bit of nostalgia, in my opinion. But the following year, though, something different happened. Something of a unique change in makeover occurred for Scooby-Doo, Shaggy, Daphne, and Scrappy. And what is that? Well, because I have 29 minutes of HD video, if you will, open to me, I will continue it in part 2.